All right, welcome to Gateway API meeting. It is April 14th, where I am at least, and got a few things on the agenda to run through, but it's pretty light. So if you have anything else you want to cover, don't hesitate to drop something on the agenda, throw it in chat, whatever works best for you. The other note I would say is this is, a Kubernetes community meeting, so please be kind to each other. And if you don't mind, please use Zoom's raise hand feature just so we can make sure we get to everyone. Don't imagine that being an issue today. But yeah, that's all we have today. First up is just 1.3. We're working on a CL on a change that a change log. Sorry, that will get RC2 out the door. This release candidate is pretty tiny in terms of changes. Some adjustments to conformance tests to make sure that the mirroring tests aren't flaky like they once were. Some adjustments to our feature definitions to mark features as standard that were effectively standard, and we just forgot this step of the process. And then one that I worked on today was something John caught on Friday, which was basically that as part of the listener set changes, we accidentally, I think it was accidental, added the option for none to route namespaces, which I don't think we want. Anyways, I reverted that basically. So it's still an option for listener namespaces, but it is not an option for route namespaces. So overall, a really tiny diff in terms of release candidate. But Dave, I wanted to ask you, because you added this to the agenda. It seems like the thing we may be trying to squeeze in here is this change to allow for a 0 port. Is that correct?
So if you look at the GEP, it was, I guess, to backtrack, the main revisions here are actually more about the clarifications in the GEP. So I would recommend folks read the stuff in the index MD. This is sort of like, hey, direct feedback from John being like, hey, I'm implementing listener sets and there's some ambiguity or languages that is kind of like contradicting based on, I think, the intent that we had when we merged the GEP and the issues. So kind of reorganize some stuff, yeah, and there's like bit reference grant semantics and things like that. So and then I also realized, like, similar to the none change, like, hey, I was like, in the earlier PR we had port being optional. I think I prefer it being defaulted to 0 as opposed to it being a null. So I was trying to figure out how to do that. And for some reason I couldn't like, because the port number variable is a type alias to the v1 port
What?
number type, and I couldn't get the annotations to work. So so there's two aspects, I guess, to the change. Like, please read the changes in the GEP, and then here's just sort of this one, which is just trying to like make sure what's in the GEP matches this, because I realized the port number was set to mid1.
Dumb question, but why? So, okay. Port being optional, I would assume the absence of a port meant all ports. Is that a fair assumption?
No, it was gonna be like
Absence of a port is
implementation picks the port. Yeah.
I missed
Oh,
that. Yeah.
okay. But how would
That is in the
okay?
gap that we merged.
Yeah,
So
that's fine. How would we? So 0 seems confusing
that
too.
again, I think that language was or might have. Uh, we actually need to check and see what's in there at the moment. Hang on. What is currently in the types? So this is, and remember, this is only for listener set, not for gateway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't have anything in the types that clarifies what empty or zero means for port here
I could
that I can see.
clarify that. The intent, yeah, was that when it's zero, I think I had like 0 nil in the GEP, and I kind of wanted to just specify one way of doing it.
Yeah. I think the key part here, Rob, is remember because I mean, we probably could skip adding this for now. I think my concern here is just probably what the one that Rob is thinking about as well is that it's a pretty big behavior change for listener. And so like when we do fold this to stable, it will be a bit
It's
right
funny, I
now.
was actually thinking of making this extended.
Right, but it's even if it's extended, it still will be part of the API surface. Like it will still be something
Yeah,
that any user can specify.
Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
there's language in the GEP to say if implementations don't support it, then they have set a
yeah.
condition on accepted.
But so the thing that's confusing to me, because I know we wanted to support all ports at some point in Gateway API, and that's why I immediately went to all ports. Well, okay, you don't specify a port, you must mean all ports, which I understand the idea for listener set in particular. When you have an absurd number of listeners, you can't really think about what port, like you can't, dedupe across all these listeners what is unique. So just give me a unique port. I don't care what it is. Um, but that is decidedly different than, like, it feels like it complicates adding all ports in the future, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
So I mean, the reason you couldn't get that type thing to work is that the port number type actually already has a validation on it, and so it already says minimum one in the shed types. So that's why if you use port number there, it won't work because you've got two different validation types.
yeah, I tried moving the validation out of there to all the uses of port number into like the gateway, and this just didn't work. So I'm just like, I didn't want to
oh,
fight
weird.
controller tools.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah,
then
that
then
works
I
for me.
saw then I saw Rob's PR. Let's call you Gob for like Gep and Rob. Uh, that you're able to do that, Rob. You're able to
Yeah.
override. So I might just have an out-of-date controller tools, maybe. I gotta dig into it.
Yeah, I used latest steps because it used to be a pure override, and but like the latest version of the libraries I was using today anyways, work great for me with like Go 124 and all the latest steps. Um, and still you would have to remove the validation on the like port number type definition and move it to every usage of port
Yeah,
number
okay.
instead, which sounds like you were doing,
Yeah,
but
let me try that again.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so
What?
yeah, I think the biggest problem there is that we have considered being able to add all ports support later. And so if we did want to do that, then we just need to figure out which semantic makes sense, right? Like so that would mean that we would at some point need to move port to a pointer if we wanted to
Yeah.
do all ports Rob, which technically breaking change. Um
Yeah.
uh I think. Hang on.
I mean, the other thing
Actually, no, it's not because it's not a
We could
breaking
do
change, yeah, because the old values continue to be valid. You can just not specify it.
yeah.
Um,
you
I
can
mean,
make it
that
an
the other thing
inter string.
yeah,
oh no, oh, I hate it. But yes, that's fair.
yeah,
The other thing we thought about doing was adding a max port, like so port becomes
yeah,
min port by default. But
I guess going back
like
to your use case, you just want one listener entry to then represent all ports. Like that's
yeah,
and then does
yeah.
that mean like for a proxy it would actually open up all the ports?
Yeah.
presumably.
So basically that's intended to be used for like effectively layer three routes, kind of. if we ever wanted to do anything that functioned at an IP layer, then on a gateway, then you would need an all ports semantic in order to be able to do that. Because port is not relevant in that case. I mean, port range is again a different thing because it's pretty common if you wanted to do, say, UDP, to have like dynamic UDP port mapping for like VoIP and lots of other UDP protocols use dynamic UDP port allocation. So you need to be able to say, hey, all of these the UDP ports between this and this all get forwarded to this service on the corresponding port. And obviously then there's also the one that you're talking about with dynamic allocation and then the usual static allocation. So all of those could be handled by you. We need I'm sorry, I'm literally just thinking out loud here. I mean, the minimal change that we could do at the moment is to leave the sharp edge of dynamic port allocation to a later date and say, for now, listener set has the same semantics as upstream gateway and is required, and you got to do the same thing. That would at least let listener set handle the everything's attaching to port 80 or everything is attaching to port 443 case. Basically, and that just means that then you have to use the existing distinct listener functionality anyway. I think if we make port optional, then it does mean that we have to update to the distinct language, because right now port is always considered, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
still okay-ish. But well, actually, that leads me to a question: is port actually optional, or is it you can leave it unspecified and a default will be provided for you?
Yeah, so it's optional for import, which is optional for input, which is what optional means, right?
Right. But so every so every defaulted field also is technically optional, right?
Yep.
And we know we can't have like a fixed static default here. That much is clear. But it does feel like what we're describing here is optional with a dynamic default.
Well, it's defaulting to 0, really. Like, is the
Well,
input. It's
okay,
defaulting to 0 on input, and then 0 means, please dynamically allocate a port and specify it in the listener status.
right, but
Is
do we
there?
even have a place to put that in listener status right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
it has a corresponding port number in the status.
I
At
mean, to
least it
me, I
should.
actually prefer the previous UX of don't specify port at all, and you'll get a port in status.
So, but that
Whereas
one,
this is specify port and set it to 0.
I mean, yes. So yeah, like, well, no.
I was.
So that, yeah, right. As it reads, that is actually, you have to specify a port and set it to 0 because there's no optional tag.
Yeah.
You also need to add the optional tag if you want it to work like that. Because then you don't
Oh,
have
actually, oh no, you're right. It is still here. I thought this line was being added.
but Dave, you've removed the optional tag there.
No, it's still
It's
there.
still there. Yeah.
Oh,
I
right.
misread this too.
Yeah.
So I guess the reason why I think originally in the GEP I had a pointer. The reason why I don't want to do pointer, because I thought we could do defaulting, so there's only one way of doing it, as opposed to like setting empty. If we're wanting port ranges, I think we should just maybe make the breaking change now and just make this like a ports, and then it could be an array of a port range that has min max maybe, and then also single, and that could give you then disjoint ports if you wanted to.
I think that's I don't want to do that now because we're in like between RC1 and 2. But this
Yeah.
change, as I understand it more, is this optional was useless before today because the optional would
defaulting to
result
0
in
anyways. Yeah.
Yeah,
a 0,
yep,
which isn't a valid value, so you'd fail. But
Yeah.
now it makes the optional valid because
yes.
the empty value is valid now.
Yeah, and so the other thing to remember here that this is a difference in behavior. That's the listener set types. So, on gateway types right now, the port is required, and its minimum value is 1.
Yeah. Dave, do you mind making a PR that is just this change? Because I know there's a lot, like what you said, the bulk of
Yeah, I
the
can
work
split it
goes
out.
in here, but this particular change feels like it's blocking RC2. And the rest, like these updates can come later, I think.
Do you read the stuff? Because like I think because I think our intent was to allow also merging with listener entry names to be, I think, only unique within the current set. Versus the language that was here before was like, hey, we just take all the listeners, mash into a list, and use the existing validation. But
Yeah.
then I think in the tail end of
If you
that
don't,
original
Yeah, and
PR, then
that was
yeah,
actually my rationale for asking for this to be split out because I want to do a proper review on this, but I feel like the proper review on this can happen after we get RC2 out. Whereas
okay.
this really does need to get in.
Does or doesn't?
Does.
yeah,
Okay.
that
Yeah.
needs to be in before RC2 for sure.
Is it this week?
I mean, yeah, ideally,
Yeah, I mean potentially
Yeah, yeah.
today.
I guess I
I mean,
mean like, hey,
yeah,
is it
today, right? Like we're hoping to do that
like
today.
yeah,
so
So
okay.
to give you an idea, this like the other thing I linked to was a changelog for RC2.
Okay.
So
yeah,
yeah.
Oh,
Um,
KubeCon. Okay.
uh,
So you just want the port fix to be pulled out, gap changes remain as they
yeah,
were. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. I'll do it now.
yeah.
thanks. Appreciate it. Um,
Uh, yeah,
go
I
ahead,
think
Nick.
I'm gonna have some thoughts about the same name thing as well. Yeah, because yeah, like it doesn't make sense. The same name thing is a problem. I see what you're saying, but like this was the exact reason that I had a lot of concerns about adding the name field to listener to start with. Um, so yeah, I'll do a review on that as soon as we're done with this meeting,
Yeah.
so that you can catch it. But like, yeah, I think, well, that change is also that's probably an RC2 blocker as well because we need to like settle on this thing. That's another behavior change, right? And having behavior
So
change.
it's in the gap,
Well,
but it wasn't like the language kind of contradicted itself a little bit. So it's just sort of clarifying the language. And the intent from the original PR was discussion was hey, when I create a listener entry, like I should just be able to set any name I care for because in contrast to just implementation detail on like making that name unique, because you could just take the listener set namespace and name and prepend it to the listener entry name and then get like a unique listener identity internally. Um, and then that way it's sort of like not the UX problem like, hey, I have conflicting listener entry names across different namespaces in the gateway. And I can just simply have routes that attach to it.
what does it mean to do so routes attached to the listener? They need to be listener set aware then at that point.
I guess the route can attach to a listener set and
If you have a
the
listener set as a
gateway.
parent ref, then yes, your implementation needs to be listener set aware for that parent ref to be accepted anyway, Rob.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. Yeah,
The
I just
the thing
yeah.
the thing here is just so yeah, so what it means is that the name on the listener set is not meaningful at the global scope, right? Like,
Yes, exactly.
Which would be admittedly very hard to enforce
anyway,
anyway.
yeah,
Because like
yeah,
you
okay.
add a new listener of name foo to an older gateway, and all of a sudden it has precedence over like an older
Yeah,
listener and a newer listener set, and you just
yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah. No, okay, yep, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, it just means that Yeah, so probably what we might need to do there is say, like, when you're implementing listener set, you need to, like, when you're referring to I will take a little bit. I just want to think about the status and how yeah, like I think one of the things that we haven't got right yet is like, do you report if you have an error in a listener set, where do you report the errors on the status for that? Do you report the errors in the status on the gateway as well? I can't remember what the status thing is there. That would be so because if you've got non-distinct names on a specific, if you've got two listeners in different listener sets with the same name, you need to make sure that if you're referring to them from the gateway, that you namespace the reference with the listener set name as well as the thing for the reference from the gateway to be meaningful. It's probably not a big deal. It just means that we need to remind people to do that. But yeah, I don't think it's probably not a blocking thing. It's just like I just want to make sure we don't miss anything. That's all.
Yeah.
The GEP also has some clarifications on like route attachment. So if you attach to the gateway, it doesn't mean it gets inherited to the listener sets as well.
Okay.
I think the only thing that gets inherited is policy. Reference grants don't, and things like that. So these are all kind of questions John had, and I realized it's good to clarify.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if you split them up, then we can talk about then we can go through the details on the zero port thing, and we can go through the details on the updates about implementation as well. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Okay.
Makes sense. Awesome. Thanks a bunch. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just a reminder 1.4. I think there's probably a fair amount of overlap between this meeting and the previous meeting, but just a heads up, we are making some release cycle changes in the next release, trying to speed things up a little bit and make the timing a little bit closer to what we've seen as useful in the past. What that also will have the effect of is we're trying to set timelines for the entire release up front this time, which means that if you've relied in the past on a deadline just kind of getting extended for a week each individual deadline, that's very unlikely this time because we're just, again, trying to plan everything out up front. So yeah, that's all we're aiming for. What that means short term is that this release scoping phase is going to feel really fast compared to previous ones. We're saying anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks. So we would say that would be wrapping up probably early in May at this point. The things that I'm currently aware of, this is just pulled from the previous meeting notes, but back in TLS, gateway client cert validation and supported features that all feel like they're on a path towards GA. The things that are new that people have been talking about that seem likely to be at least proposed in scope for 1.4 are cluster IP gateways, external auth, automatic MTLS. This is something that came out of KubeCon, but basically for a tighter integration with gateway, between gateways and mesh, especially if your gateway happens to live outside of cluster. The idea of a default gateway, rate limiting, and then this is not really a feature. Well, it's a useful thing, but it's more of a UX improvement than any API feature, and this is basically a way to bundle CRD installation with your.
I think that it may have to take up a GEP slot though to cover because it's a reasonable amount. It's quite an amount of work.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Okay. So those
to
are the
remind
ones.
everybody, I think the thing that's
ahead.
important to remind everybody though is that part of the scoping phase is that we have a limited number of slots for each area. So we did move a couple of things into standard, I think, this time. So I think we're going to have a couple of free slots in standard. Moving things to standard. So those 3 features, if we get all those, basically anything that wants to move to standard always goes first. And then the experimental features, there's a certain number of slots left, and we will we'll have the community vote on all of the things, stack rank them. We give them a weight as well. So there's like a maintainer weight score that we add, and then we add up all. This is all in an open spreadsheet, and we add up all of those rankings, get everything in an order, and then whatever the number of slots we decide are available, then we assign those to those slots, and those are the things that end up in scope. And so that's just very, very relevant because that's going to be key this time, because almost certainly we'll have a bunch of features that we don't have the bandwidth to review. So yeah, I just want to be clear about that, because like we're trying to make this as fair as possible to everybody, so that everybody knows. And so that's why this scoping phase is quite important, because the scoping phase covers everybody putting in their things, everybody voting, and then us doing this analysis and naming things in or out of scope. And then we move on to the get refinement phase.
Yeah, and to be clear, the heaviest weight by far is the community interest. What is upvoted on the scoping discussion, and you can see this is the scoping discussion or spreadsheet Nick was alluding to for 1.3, and the top 3, as the community voted, made it into. I think this was the cut line. I think we let the top 4 in. And the three of those were the most voted for ones, and then looks like ready condition missed the bar because we just didn't think it was implementable primarily. But yes, that's that's just a recap of what we're going to be in for in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But please, we'll start a scoping discussion soon, and please get your ideas out there. The other thing, I don't know if Nick mentioned it, but to submit something to scoping discussion, you're also volunteering to lead that work. It's very easy to just submit feature requests and hope that someone will do them, but because there are limited slots, we really want to make sure that when someone submits an idea, they also are prepared to do the work to get that across the line. So yeah, I think that's all. Any last agenda items that may have missed here? Anything we should talk about? Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. See you.